Are you brand new in business and you've got a wonderful idea, wonderful thoughts of how you're going to build a business and make some extra income, but what do you do with all the legal advice that you need? You certainly can't afford a $300, $400, $500 lawyer. So if that is the case where you are in need of some sort of legal advice, stick around, because today's show, I've got Billie Sinclair with me, who's going to give us some fantastic advice on what our options are when it comes to setting up our business and getting that very important legal advice that we need. Billie, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really looking forward to hearing some sage advice from somebody who has been around the block with knowing some of the issues that small businesses and solo entrepreneurs face when trying to run their business. And one of the first things that I wanted to ask you was, what is the biggest mistake that you see when somebody is brand new to the business world and they're trying to set up a business? What kind of things are you noticing out there?
Right. So, well, thank you so much for having me here. I do appreciate that. One of the things that I see, and this is so important, we are all looking for ways to make additional income. So here's a woman at home. Maybe she's a professional from the past, and now she's at home looking after her children, and she has a skill set. She wants to earn money by having, by giving that skill set out to the world. Unfortunately, she doesn't have a business. And very often, because of just the cost of setting up a business properly, we go into agreements with people to say, okay, yes, I'll do this work for you, but you don't have a contract in place, and you really don't have any legal support. So I think that's a place that we could start our conversation. That's a big, it's always, everything's fine until it's not.
Right. And that is so true. Like what the scenario that you described, I'm sure all of us can relate to, having this vision, having this idea, having this sense that, hey, I can make money off of this, and just jumping in with both feet and not thinking in terms of this is an actual business that we're creating here. And so a contract is definitely part of that scenario in many different types of contracts, right? What kind of contracts would a brand new entrepreneur need to think about and have on their radar?
Well, the very first thing to think about is just your terms and conditions. I mean, I've had so many stories. Maybe it's a good time to share a story where someone reached out to me and said, hey, I did this work for this lady, and I submitted my invoice, and she said, great, she'd pay me in 90 days. And I was like, well, wait a minute, I can't pay my bills if people don't pay me in 90 days. I expected to be paid immediately. So I reached a conclusion that there must not have been any agreement, and it was just done on a handshake. And sure enough, that's what happened. And so terms and conditions are so important, because if you ask someone to do work for you and then they don't provide any terms and conditions, you're at risk. And if you do work for someone and you did not submit some terms and conditions to them, now you're at risk. So there's so many risks involved that just having a legal component to your agreement makes all the difference in the world.
And yeah, that is so true. And it's kind of interesting how somebody who needs to pay the bill is setting the terms as to when they're going to pay. So when we get our phone bill, do we tell the phone company, yeah, I'll pay you when I according to my standards and rules, I'll pay you in 90 days. So it's interesting how some people even think that is, something that should happen. But yeah, you're right. If there's no original agreement in place, then why not? Why shouldn't they dictate the terms as to when they will pay?
Right, and you're making an excellent point. When we sign up for a cell phone, we get 10 pages of terms and conditions.
Right.
And we don't know what's in there, but we sign it because we want the cell phone.
Right.
And when you're a small business, you don't realize that those are things you're accustomed to. You've been signing those kind of agreements all the time. So when your cell phone bill comes and it's due on November 17th, you just assume that's when it's due.
Right.
So the same practice has to come into place for a solopreneur, a small business owner.
Yeah.
You have to lay out the parameters so that for example, that example that I just gave, they could have had a conversation had they exchanged terms and conditions. And the customer might have said, well, I want to pay my bill in 90 days. And the vendor might have said, but that's not okay with me. And then have the opportunity to maybe negotiate something else. But with no agreement in place, you're just basically crossing your fingers and praying lots.
Yeah, that's so true. Oh, so true. So what other types of typical things do you see? Like, I know we're on social media quite a bit. What do you notice on social media from questions being asked and the concerns that are brought up about that kind of scenario?
Right. Well, what I can think of is that a lot of times we've become so accustomed to information being readily available that we think a Google search is going to get us our answer. And as a small business owner, I get it. There is a lot of information out there, and it's valuable, and I appreciate that. But the next step that people often take is going to their tribe and just asking a question in their Facebook group or something like that. And I see so often where those answers, like, I'm not a lawyer and I don't pretend to be one, but I have a lot of experience and exposure to the legal field.
Right.
And I'm an advocate for legal advice and affordable legal advice. But it's not good to just follow what you read from people just throwing in their conjecture, maybe what they went through. But every situation is unique and different, and a lawyer's job is to make sure that your specific need is covered in your terms and conditions or in any contractual agreement that you make with someone else. So I think that's the worst thing, is using social media in place of. There's actually a funny coffee mug that says, please don't confuse, how does it say, don't confuse social media with my law degree.
Oh, that's a good one. I think that is so important. I think we need to emphasize this point because social media has become so prevalent. Google has become so prevalent, and in a very short period of time, like it is something new that we're all trying to figure out, and it just seems so handy to have a question, have an issue, have a scenario pop up, and go, oh, I'll just ask on social media what to do about this. And we really need to think that through, unless we are actually asking a lawyer for legal advice, which we shouldn't be doing and tapping into free advice anyway. But, we have to be careful about the response that we get back. And honestly, that's one thing that you will never find me do, is ask for any kind of advice on anything, because there's just way too much information that needs to happen before any kind of advice can be given. And so for the people who want to jump in and offer their advice on what happened to them, they're not really doing us the best service in giving that misinformation, because it's not specific to that particular instance of what happened.
Right, and if I can just add something, a lawyer is liable for the information that they give you. And that's important. That's like a doctor. They're liable for the information that they give us when we seek out their help.
Right.
A lawyer is the same thing.
Yeah.
So if you just ask on social media and you follow someone's advice because this is what happened to them, they are not liable for what they said. They could just say anything. They might even be doing it to the best of their ability, but they forgot some of the details of what happened in that situation, which sounds similar to yours, but like you said, they're actually all very different. So a lawyer's job is to specify this action for this situation and their liability. So I think that liability is really important to take into consideration, because then you can know that you're getting information that's correct for your situation.
Yeah, and that's so true. So what do we say, or what do you say when somebody who's brand new in business has a very small budget? What do you say to them? Say, well, I can't afford to hire some, $300 an hour lawyer. So I think a lot of entrepreneurs feel like they're in a tight spot. The best thing that they can do is get advice from their social followers, but you have an alternate suggestion to help people with.
Right, so I found out about this by accident, and a lot of people do, that there is a new model for legal advice, and it's called LegalShield. And for a small monthly subscription, like about $1 a day, I now have access, unlimited access, to a full-service law firm in Vancouver, because that's where I live, or in British Columbia, but in every state and province in North America. We now have access to this, so it's no longer only two options: no legal advice or pay $300 or $400 an hour.
Right.
Now we have an in-between there, where once you're a member and a subscriber, it's kind of like Netflix.
Right.
You know, you just
on
just
demand.
turn it on. It's on demand. It's
Yeah.
even on your app on your phone.
Yeah.
So you just the freedom to be able to call the lawyer, it just changes everything for
Yeah.
the small business owner. What about this? What about that? What are my rights? What are my responsibilities? How might I handle this situation? What templates can I go look at? What documents might be important for this kind of work that I'm thinking about putting out there into the world? All of those are legal questions, and now we do have an option, so solopreneurs don't have to wing it anymore.
Yeah, and I think that this type of service is so important for those reasons. You know, it's not like an all or nothing scenario where there are ways for us to tap into that expertise and have ourselves protected. That's, at the end of the day, we're running a business, and we have to remember that this is a business, and business requires legal forms, legal documents, contracts, and making sure that things are set up right, and all to protect us from legal action, being sued, and collecting money that's owed to us, all of that kind of stuff, and just making sure that we have that solid foundation that we're building our business upon. So tell us a little bit more about how people can get a hold of you. You are a LegalShield representative, and so how can people tap into that service?
Right, so I'm hoping that just on the links in our video here, they'll be able to see how they can reach out to me. I'm certainly active on Facebook, and I've, Twitter and Instagram and all the regular places that we all hang out today. And certainly I'm available to answer questions, so it doesn't mean that they are obligating themselves in any way. Just reach out. I'm always available to answer the questions. How does the system work? What does it cost? Are there any long-term agreements? And I'm just available to make sure that they get their questions answered so that they can get the help that they need.
Perfect. And it is important to note that you yourself is not a lawyer, so you're not going to be the one giving legal advice. You're kind of the conduit to get people to connect with the proper legal advice that they need, right?
Yes, and in fact, my favorite response to every question is, "That sounds like a great question for the law firm."
Right. Yeah. Knowing and understanding our boundaries, right? And I think that's an important message. Just going back to me talking about us just throwing out questions on social media and people offering advice. Know your own boundaries of what kind of advice you should be sharing, because who knows how that advice can adversely affect somebody else.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That would be irresponsible of me. I'd be doing the same thing everyone else is doing, to say,
Right.
"Oh, well, this is what you do." No, actually, I don't know enough about your situation to suggest what you should do.
Yeah.
But I guess the thing I suggest you do is talk to a lawyer.
Right. Yeah. Talk to the experts, right?
Talk to the experts.
So thank you so much for joining us today, Billie. I really appreciate that. I know that we're going to have you on for a few more segments coming up, and we're going to talk a little bit more about contracts and the invoicing and how to collect money and stuff like that. So I so appreciate you being on today's show, just to give us an overview of understanding that we are running a business and there are legal ramifications involved in any business, and having that legal advice at your fingertips is just so important. So I really appreciate you being on the show, and all of the links to get a hold of Billie are down in the the description section below. And that's it for today's show. I'll talk to you next time. Bye for now.
Thank you too.